Welcome, everybody, to episode 56 of the Breaking Balls podcast. We're here to break down what is quickly becoming the yearly Monday Dover race, a washout this weekend, but we got a whole lot of Truex on both races. Little beef on the track. Ross Chastain, of course, at it again. And going to talk a little silly season. Josh Berry's future full-time Cup. If you're here because of Adam and his family the last few weeks, you might not like this episode. The solo Bob time. We're going to get to know each other a little better.
Flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.
That is right, folks. It is episode 56 of the Breaking Balls podcast. A rare Monday episode, but Mother Nature had some plans for us to be here today. A little washout at Dover. Again, third time in 4 years. It's quickly becoming a Monday race over there up in Delaware, the beautiful state of Delaware. So we're stuck on a Monday night doing this podcast. Of course, Martin Truex, your winner. We got a lot to break down from that race, but we won't ignore the elephant in the room here. This is a solo Bob Breaking Balls podcast. We had a lot of Adam the last few weeks with his wedding, his engagement, his story with Anna. And quite frankly, folks, I'm sick of it. I'm taking my podcast back. We are bringing this back to NASCAR first and foremost. So we're resetting. He is on the coast of Italy somewhere right now. No service. Didn't even watch the race. The audacity, the nerve. Not committed to this podcast, folks. I took time out of my work schedule and watched this Dover 400 lap race. So I'm here to break it down with you. Get used to this voice. Like I said, we're going to get to know each other a little bit better after this episode. So again, as our co-host and me always say, we're not going to bury the lead here. This was a Martin Truex kind of weekend. Obviously, his brother Ryan winning the Xfinity Series race on Saturday, and then Monday, the old 19 back in victory lane. First time in 54 races that he gets in there. Obviously, not counting the Clash. He was the winner out in LA to start the season, but first points race in 54 races. So huge for him in that 19 team to get the monkey off of their back. I mean, it felt like every single time the last year and a half, especially with this next gen car, they found ways to be competitive and put themselves into position. And one way or another, they've kind of boned themselves and found a way to not win. And so to see them, have a late strategy call to take 2 tires, hold off Ross Chastain with 4 tires there on a 7-lap shootout, basically. Credit to that 19 team, James Small, and them making the right call. A couple of guys did make that 2-tire call to pit there. Blaney was one of them. We'll get into that in a second, but again, Martin Truex and that team finally being on the right side of one here kind of felt right, kind of felt great. It just felt like it was destiny after his brother getting his first career Xfinity win. I thought that was really cool to see. So locking themselves in, the third Toyota team to win this year. Toyota was strong today, obviously. All 6 of their cars in the top 13. Even old Ty Gibbs was running at top 5. Looked like he was going to have a top 5 day for his first time in his career. Ended up P13 there, but a solid day in the Toyota camp. We'll get into that too, but we'll jump into that restart real quick with 7 to go. You get Ross Chastain. He's got 4 tires. He's put himself in position all day. He's had a great car, and his pit crew kind of, I'm not going to say drop the ball here because they went 4 tires, but they got him out there 4th. He's going to be behind, I believe it ended up being he was behind Ryan Blaney, I believe. So he was on the bottom side there, kind of pinned down, not where you want to be on the restart there. And he ended up getting clear finally of Blaney after about 3 laps, and then he was trying to hunt down the 19. But Truex just held his own there. Was running. I think Boyer said with four laps to go, ran his fastest lap of the day. So 2 tires was the call there, and strategy works out. Sometimes it doesn't. The one car, people have forgotten, but Ross Chastain has not won a race since April of last year. So we're over a year that one team hasn't won. We kind of forget with the wall ride Martinsville, him getting into the playoffs and then that championship for. But that one team hasn't seen victory lane in over a year. We'll get into Ross Chastain here in a little bit, but he obviously had one of the strongest cars. But Martin Truex, held it off. Ran some great lap times those last 7 laps. And, I got to be honest, when Martin Truex and Ryan Blaney were running right there together, those are two guys that, let's not make two bones about it. They are, their drought has been serious as far as the winlessness with this next gen car. So when they're going into turn 2 and Blaney gets a little loose there, Chastain actually got a run on them. I thought, oh God, here we go. They're going to take each other out. And these two guys that have been fighting so long for a win, they're going to take each other out. Nobody's going to get the win here. So credit to both of them, Blaney especially, for running clean there at the bottom. At the end of the day, that is shockingly Penske's only, I believe, third or second top 5 in 7 races at Dover. They have really not had speed there. And, he was the only guy in the top, I believe, 25 for the Penske Corral. So, credit to Ryan Blaney for ended up having a really strong day. But, man, big for the 19 team to get that monkey off their back. Like I said, it just felt like they've been so close the last few races, the last couple of weeks. That Toyota camp has finally found some speed here and consistency, and he's found himself kind of rejuvenated this year. It looks like he's hungry after missing the playoffs last year. So big on them, the 19 team getting in. This race, to be quite honest, it felt like kind of an old school NASCAR race. And I don't know, maybe it was just Rusty Wallace in the booth, but you had these long green flag cycles. Very rarely did you have cautions. You had kind of that old school racing where, the green flag cycles, you had the pit cycles there, the strategy came in, the tire fall off was very aggressive when it happened. You saw late in a couple of stages, Kevin Harvick had a really bad fall off. Kyle Busch had a really bad fall off to end stage 1 where he ended up going a lap down. Him and his teammate Austin Dillon raced each other back to the line. And, it was just when your right side tires, especially when the back side went out, those tires were cordoned and they went fast. So, credit to Goodyear. They actually brought a competitive tire. Like I said, felt like an old school kind of NASCAR race here. And you didn't have a big wreck. You didn't have controversy. You had a couple of different comers and goers as far as leaders here. We'll get into kind of how the strategy played out, but there was probably 3 or 4 different guys who, at some point in this race, I was considered, this guy is probably the favorite now. He's got the car to beat. And so really, that's what you want in these races. You want a little bit of mystery. You want a little bit of, it changes over the race longevity, the marathon, if you will, of these 400 laps there. The track's obviously going to change because they did say, there at one point it was sprinkling for a moment, but cloudy, it was sunny. Obviously, the track's going to change, and you're going to have some guys that nail the setup and that don't nail the setup because there's no practice, no qualifying. There was a little bit of practice, I guess, but the guys that were out there, obviously on a green track, half the guys that went out there spun, so you really can't take much of what was going into this weekend, obviously with qualifying canceled and that field being set by the system, the generic lineup, whatever they do. But getting that, you had, let's just get into kind of how it was coming and going. Obviously, early on, Kyle Busch, William Byron, both really fast early on. And Kyle Busch, you're thinking, oh boy, here you go. RCR nailed the setup coming out of the gates. It seems like they're either hot or they're not when they come out. And, you had Austin Dillon kind of midway in the pack, and Kyle Busch ended up falling after, a speeding penalty, and then he got caught up in the early wreck that, Daniel Suarez and a couple of those guys, Noah Gragson was tagged up in there. So, you didn't get to see the full speed of the 8, I don't think, today, quite honestly. But William Byron, I mean, man alive. I thought Chase Elliott was going to be the Hendrick car to come in today and have the speed. William Byron is just showing that, this stretch to start the season, the first third of the regular season, William Byron is probably the most consistent as far as leading laps, as far as raw speed. It just feels like every single weekend that 24 car is in the top 5. And we had that talk, me and Adam, a couple weeks ago, where he had the great start last year, and then, Logano kind of bumped him out of the way, Darlington, and it kind of knocked it. Felt like the confidence and the momentum out of that 24 team. This year, I mean, this 24 team seems dialed in, and they seem like they are, quite honestly, the most consistent Hendrick car, and again, the most probably consistent in the field. There's probably a couple guys you could argue, Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick at times, Denny Hamlin, but at the end of the day, William Byron's leading the laps. William Byron's the one leading laps here. And credit to that 24 team, man. I'm curious to see how long it can keep up if they are legitimate championship contenders. But until proven otherwise, I'm going to say yes. Kyle Busch, obviously fell off there, had that damage. But then you get to the mid-pack. William Byron's fast. You get Ross Chastain, who's fast. Denny Hamlin even found himself up there. Denny Hamlin, no bones about it, has been saying they need a win. They are starving for a win in that 11 camp. It was nice to actually see FedEx actually on the car this week. I think they said that out of the first 10 races, I think two of the races, Denny Hamlin's been sponsored by FedEx. That's something to note as well. That Denny Hamlin not only has not signed his contract, FedEx last year, their deal. I'm not worried yet, but I'm glad to see that the 11 car looked normal again. They had speed, and then I got to be honest, Denny Hamlin's pit crew has let him down tremendously this year. There's been multiple times where he has been in great positions to come out of pit road in a top 5 position, and his pit crew has, quite frankly, boned him. They put him, losing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spots, untimely pit stops here, and it was no less. He had a penalty there, but then also multiple times in that in that cycle in stage 2 and 3, it just felt like they weren't on the same pace as Martin Truex's crew, who really put him in position late in the race and got him the win. That was a team effort there. Denny Hamlin's team, it felt like he was getting those positions in spite of his pit crew, and that's not not a recipe for success for a team that is already starving for win. You need everything to go in your favor, as you can see with the 19 team. So eventually it'll probably come, but Hamlin obviously gets a top 5 finish. It wasn't a bad day by any means of the stretch, but just felt like they were wanting a little bit more. I think they had a little bit more speed than even 5th place there, but obviously Chastain, Truex late, get that battle. Chastain is the one leading there. Then they get that long green flag stretch where Truex comes in, I believe, a lap or 2 earlier, and then they cycle out. Truex has about a 2-second lead. Chastain does hunt him down, but again with this next gen car, you can't really pass. You've got to get a great run. You've got to be able to either time it or you've got to get that inside line, it seems like. And Chastain just couldn't run him down, and you get that caution. That was not what the 19 team wanted when Joey Logano finally, his tires gave out. It felt like they were due to give out at some point today. Finally gives out with 11, 12 to go. And Chastain takes 4 tires, and that was the end of the day. I mean, he was definitely involved in a lot today, but again, it just felt like mistakes were the biggest difference between these cars that had speed. Whether it was Kyle Busch putting himself in a bad position to get caught up in a wreck early, Denny Hamlin, multiple pit errors. Brad Keselowski was running top 5 early in stage 2 even. Had the tire go AWOL and, run in front of his car. They had to run him back. Ends up, saving it. Gets a, top 8 finish, finished 8th there. Again, RFK, both their cars finishing in the top 9, Busch or 9th. That team's just incredibly well done in the team has done incredible in what the turnaround has happened there. But Keselowski had a car that you could argue was top 5, and a pit stop error is probably what put him back in track position. And again, once you get the further up into the top 10, the top 5, it's hard to pass these cars. And the margin for error is so razor thin, even in a 400 lap race, that a mistake like that for Brad Keselowski, I really do think cost him a top 5 day. But I guess we made it 14 minutes in, folks. I wanted to wait, but I think it's time. We might as well just get into the Ross Chastain. What I don't even know what you can call it now. The Ross Chastain weekly beef, bi-weekly beef, because he does, he's consistent. It's not every week, but it has been a few weeks for our friend Ross Chastain to get into some kind of qualm, if you will. But here we are. Here we are. You get it. Early in stage 1, he runs up going into turn 3 on the low side, and he gets, I guess he just gets a little impatient behind Brennan Poole, who's making his first start in the old Rick Ware Rocket, the 15 car. And Brennan's just trying to get clean laps here. This is his first race of the year in the Cup Series. And Ross just bumps him, just sends him sailing into the apron into turn 3, slides up and collects Kyle Larson, who was running P3 at the time. Chastain was kind of battling Larson for P3, P4 there. Takes out Larson basically for the day. Larson goes back to the pits. He's 28 laps down. I think finishes the race somewhere around there. Ruins the day, though, for him. Immediately on the radio says, effing Ross. Yeah, what is he doing? It's early in stage 1. You're on a lap car, and you just send a guy that, you got to be more aware. And Ross was very adamant, on the radio right after. I'm sorry, didn't mean that. It's the same thing though. Every time this happens where Ross Chastain has some kind of contact, some kind of conflict on the track, it's the same show and dance where I've got to do better. I'm going to go apologize, and I've got to learn from my mistakes. But Brennan Poole saying somebody's going to have to beat him up. I mean, he's getting away with it every week, every time he gets away with it. He gets the slap on the wrist, the verbal abuse from the drivers. Oh, that's Ross. Alex Bowman's tweeting. Oh, that's the one. There you go. You got Kyle Larson saying, of course, every week with Ross. But until somebody actually does something here, and you've got Denny Hamlin who pushes him up into the wall at Phoenix and takes him out. He says, "You're coming with me." It's going to be more than that. And until then, Ross Chastain's going to keep doing this because, we talk about Ross Chastain and say, oh, he's got to learn all that. He ended up finishing second today. Would he do it again in a heartbeat? Absolutely. More power to him. That's the kind of racer is. I'm not one to criticize that. NASCAR needs a guy like Ross Chastain. They need an aggressive driver who pushes the feathers, who ruffles the feathers, and really kind of rocks the status quo of the garage. But there's a time and a place also. And to take it out on, the 15 car there, Brennan Poole, in his first start, to only get, I don't even, 60-something laps in the race. It's a shame. You hate to see it more than anything. But you kind of come to expect it. And again, until somebody does something, whether it's on the track or off the track physically, I mean, somebody's got to go old school here to really teach Ross a lesson. And I'm curious to see when that happens, what it takes to hit that breaking point. Because, I mean, for God's sake, you saw Bubba Wallace attack Kyle Larson for less last year at Kansas. So I'm very curious to see what the next couple of weeks look like with Ross Chastain. Everyone's always vocal about it. But until then, we're going to keep doing this. It's going to be the same thing. This is episode 56 of Breaking Balls. And let me tell you, the first 30 episodes that me and Adam did this, it was a lot of Ross Chastain this, Ross Chastain that. It becomes you're beating a dead horse. You're saying the same things over and over. The same apologies with Ross, the same things we're saying on this podcast. So you're probably sick of me rambling about this. I'm sick of making it a weekly thing. But it's a notable story because it did take out a very fast car. Kyle Larson seems to be involved in a lot this year. He's got a fast car every week, it seems like, but instead of William Byron getting those consistent top 5, top 10 finishes, Alex Bowman, he's getting caught up in these wrecks that, really are no fault of his own for the most part. A couple of beefs here and there, the Ryan Preece incident, of course. But it's interesting to see the contrast between someone like William Byron and Kyle Larson. So I'm sure that this is not the end of it. Obviously, you saw Larson blocking Chastain as he was trying to run down Truex in the last 30 laps. He said, take that for what it is. We'll see if that continues moving forward. But two guys that I don't think are going to see the last of each other because they're both playoff caliber drivers. Larson's already locked in. I don't see Chastain not pointing his way in if he doesn't win. But again, hasn't won since April. Nobody's really mentioned that. I just want to have that moment with you viewers, with you listeners. Ross Chastain has not won since April of the last year. So, we'll see. Since Talladega, he's great for NASCAR, but at the same time, you get kind of sick of the same thing over and over. So, overall, just, from this Dover race, again, it was a Toyota race. It was a Toyota race through and through. 6 cars in the top 13, all 6 of the Toyota camp in the top 13. RFK 8 and 9. Chris Bell, Denny Hamlin 5, 6. Those guys finding ways to get results. We talked about Blaney again being third. There's one thing I gotta mention though here. Stewart-Haas. My goodness. Somebody help them. I don't know what they're going to do after Kevin Harvick leaves. We'll talk about that here in a minute. That's what we call a soft tease in the business. But Stewart-Haas, Ryan Preece was your highest runner, 17th. This is supposedly the anchor of the Ford manufacturers, the 4-car team. All their funding's covered. No show. And I mentioned Penske struggles coming into this race. I believe 1 or 2 top 5s in the last 6 races. Make that 1 more now in 7 races. The Ford camp really does struggle at Dover, but Stewart-Haas especially. Harvick 19th, Almirola 24th. Chase Briscoe was 30th. BJ McLeod finished above Chase Briscoe. JJ Yeley finished above Chase Briscoe. Harrison Burton finished above half of SHR, and he would have been the second highest Penske car. Just very interesting to see that Ford is struggling so hard at this track. Obviously, Joey Logano crashes out, but Austin Cindric, 26th. It seems like it's going to be, an Austin Cindric kind of having to point his way in. And these are the races that he's going to look back on late in the year and say, hey, we needed to make more gains at tracks like this, because when you look at the point standings right now, the cutoff line is 19 points between Chase Briscoe, who's in, and Daniel Suarez, who's 19 out. You got Austin Cindric 26 points out. Somewhere in the middle, Ty Gibbs 22 out, Michael McDowell 33 out, but Austin Cindric 23 points, 26 points out. These outside the top 20 runs for the 2-car are just not gonna do it. They're not gonna cut it, because you're not gonna have 16 winners this year. I hate to break it to the field. I hate to break it to the viewers here. You're not gonna have the same parity as last year. The old Bob math tells you you're probably going to get about 11 to 12 winners. But, you get the gap there. Suarez 19, Briscoe plus 19. Briscoe was 30th, Suarez was 35th? Yeah, 35th. The door is open there. But these guys are not getting results right now. These guys that have a lot of, potential to be playoff drivers, people that are funded to be playoff drivers, cars that are expected to be. That 2-car at Penske is, in theory, the anchor of that team. Obviously, Logano, the 22 now, is kind of taking it over, but that 2-car was always the anchor of Penske. If it doesn't make the playoffs here, outside of that Daytona 500 when he wouldn't have made the playoffs last year, hasn't been a great start there for the 2-car. That's something to watch here. On a positive note, though, because we're a little negative here. I don't like the negativity, actually. Let's reel it back in here. On a positive note, Corey LaJoie, 14th. Ricky Stenhouse, 15th. Eric Jones, 16th, by the way. Legacy Motor Club. Little golf clap. Legacy getting a decent result finally with that 43 car, but Ricky Stenhouse in 15th and Corey LaJoie, 14th. Wow. They are really impressing with the week in and week out performance of these cars. They're not competing for wins. Don't be looking for that. But a top 20, top 15, a top 10, or a top 20 for them is a top 10 for most teams. A top 15 is a top 5 for them. A top 10 is basically a win. So to really, to go back to the points here, I mean, LaJoy is right outside of Bubba Wallace. I mean, they're really Stenhouse. Obviously, he's in the playoffs with that win at the Daytona 500. Corey LaJoy is a dark horse factor to make the playoffs. I'm not saying he's going to, but he's going to be in that on the bubble side when it comes down to the Daytona race in July for that cutoff playoff race. Corey LaJoy is going to be a factor, absolutely. Credit to that Spire team because on the other side, Ty Dillon, he gets caught up in that Daniel Suarez wreck early. I don't know if it's Ty Dillon, if they're just putting all the funding into Corey LaJoy, but that tale of two halves on that Spires side. But just to kind of wrap it up here, a lot of Ford in the mid to late pack here. Again, Chase Briscoe. Oh my goodness. Oh, Noah Gragson 34th. You get Ty Gibbs again finishing 13th. Tale of two different rookie races here. After Gragson was the kind of the darling last week at Talladega, but huge for the 19 team. Martin Truex again with his brother winning his first career race on Saturday. It was a very Truex weekend. Just another Martin Monday. I wish it was Sunday. I'm so sorry if you had to hear that. If you've already made it to 26 minutes in of just me talking and you had to hear me do a Manic Monday remix, I'm so sorry. But we'll jump into something a little bit more refreshing. We'll get out of Dover. We'll get into a little NASCAR silly season because it's been talked about the last week or two. Obviously with Alex Bowman, we didn't even talk about that since the wedding has happened. Alex Bowman's going to be out for about 3 to 4 weeks with a fractured vertebrae, I believe. Was injured in a sprint car accident last Tuesday. Josh Berry, the Simpsons gif of him Barney getting thrown out by Mo and Barney's right behind him. That's Josh Berry and Hendrick Motorsports, basically, where he's back. He's in the 48 car instead of the 9 car. Incredible opportunity, though. It doesn't get any better for Josh. Hendersonville, Tennessee native. We are live from Hendersonville, Tennessee right now, so got to give it up for Josh. I don't think we're in Josh's house. He doesn't pay rent here, so I'd be very concerned if he was upstairs right now. Anyway, Josh Berry, it seems like Larry Mack on SiriusXM last week said that it's all but foregone that Josh Berry's got a cup ride next year, and Clint Boyer alluded to it today on the broadcast with Fox that a big team, which it's been rumored in the past, Berry would only go to a competitive ride. Obviously, the Hendrick seats are not going anywhere. You wondered, okay, is he going to stay with Chevy? He doesn't really have a lot of sponsorship ties. Tire Pros, Bass Pro Shop, but a lot of that is tied to Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Junior Motorsports, who he drives for on the Xfinity side. You think, okay, where can he go here? And it seems like it's been all but foregone that Josh Berry is going to be driving the 4 car, I believe, next year for Stewart-Haas Racing. So Josh Berry will probably be taking over for Kevin Harvick. I'm very curious to see, how we got here. Because I, to be quite honest, expected a bigger name. You need a flagship driver for a flagship role in that 4 car. You're losing sponsorship, possibly Hunt Brothers for sure, Busch Beer, although has been announced it's going to be Trackhouse who's taking them away. You're losing sponsorship. You're going to have somebody that's probably bringing in sponsorship, you'd think. Josh Berry probably doesn't do that. Obviously, Chevy, not a huge manufacturer type, but does drive Chevy, go into the Ford camp. But it seems like it's all but foregone that Josh Berry is going to be driving that 4 car next year. So, very interested to see. Obviously, he finished 10th again today in that 48 car. Outdueled Chase Elliott. He was the second highest Hendrick driver today. So it's not like he's not getting results in a good car. But I'm very interested to see what that dynamic looks like at Stewart-Haas. Again, they need somebody that's going to bring in money, that's going to bring in championship contending abilities. I don't get that right away with Josh Berry. And, already in his early 30s. I'm very curious to see if he can lead an organization like that, because he's going to be the old guy in that team out when Eric Almirola retires after next year. It's going to be him, Chase Briscoe, I guess Ryan Preece, and then Cole Custer or whoever you want to fill into that next seat. Eric Jones potentially, whoever. But Josh will be the old guy in the field there. I'm very curious to see what it looks like. I did think about this from an outside perspective of, well, he doesn't have sponsorship. But friend of the podcast, Evan Locknett, did bring it to my attention today. He's going to the one other team besides Hendrick Motorsports that can kind of self-fund these teams. Obviously, the Haas tooling, Gene Haas, the funding, cash cow, the F1 self-sustaining, whatever you want to call it, empire he's built. He self-funded Cole Custer for basically 3 seasons at the Cup level, so they're not foreign to it. Obviously, Ryan Preece has gotten some of that sponsorship. Smithfield's stuck with Eric Almirola, so you don't have to worry about that. And then Chase Briscoe has Mahindra Tractor. So, yeah, I guess that the Haas tooling and the Haas sponsorship could stick on to Josh Berry for a lot of the season for whatever they can't fill in from what he brings to the table. So, I guess it does make a little bit more sense than originally I had thought. But I'm very, like I said, very interested to see what that dynamic looks like over there. Because that is, supposedly, I know Penske is the championship team, but Stewart-Haas is the flagship team for Ford with all 4 charters. They get all the funding, or a lot of the self-funding there. Outside of Kevin Harvick's competitiveness when he had that streak back in 2020 when him and Denny Hamlin were going at it, they haven't been championship contenders. They had some aero work that they had curbed back in 2021, where they said they lost a couple of tenths, and they never really recovered since then. The next-gen car, obviously Ford had the nose kind of fixed early in the season, and Ford kind of was a step back, and SHR was really one of the teams that really struggled because of that. So they've been behind the 8 ball already. It seems like maybe they're catching up at times, and then other times you get this week where they have a complete dud. So I'm very curious to see what Josh Berry looks like in the 4-car, what sponsorship stays, what he brings, and what the future of SHR looks like, because it's at a crossroads right now. So never going to say no to another Hendersonville, Tennessee stock car driver. Obviously, Joseph Newgarden out in IndyCar in the open wheel segment. Not saying we're the capital of motorsports yet, Indianapolis, but, we add 1 or 2 more. We're on the honorable mention side, so I had to talk a little silly season because it feels like this announcement's inevitable. Obviously, moving forward, we will update when that happens over here at Breaking Balls. We're 33 minutes into the Solo Bob podcast. Again, if you've made it this far, go ahead, subscribe. Tell Adam that maybe this podcast is better off without him, just to make him sweat. If you haven't heard, maybe I mentioned it at the beginning, he is somewhere on the Italian coast right now, living it up with his beautiful wife, Anna. Probably not even thinking about Martin Truex Jr., Cole Custer, or any sort of NASCAR shenanigans, I guess, if you will. So it's been a pleasure, folks. We could talk a little Titans if you want. I have you right now. I guess I'll vent for a second before I wrap this thing up. The Will Levis pick's going to test me. It's going to test all of us, folks. But I think I've at least come to the conclusion they have to get rid of Ryan Tannehill. And I hate saying that because he's the best quarterback they've had since Steve McNair. But I think it's time they get rid of Ryan Tannehill. See what you've got in Will Levis this year. Sink or swim for the young Kentucky man. If he's the guy, great. You know what you got. Because you've only got 4 years with a rookie deal since he wasn't a first-round pick. If he's not the guy, you probably tanked bad enough to where you've got a decent offensive line set up now with Skronowski, and you've got a couple pickups, Jalen Duncan from Maryland, Boise State, undrafted free agent. Got some pieces around. Get rid of Tannehill. Add a vet receiver or 2. And then if he's not the guy, you're in position for Caleb Williams next year. And let me tell you, folks, I will do whatever it takes. I will convert to Catholicism. I will convert to Islam. I will convert to Scientology. I will do whatever it takes for Caleb Williams to become a Tennessee Titan. Whatever it takes. Caleb Williams needs to be in two-tone blue. Titans need to go from 117 in Ryan Tannehill to another 17 in Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams. So, going to be a long season in Nashville, but the future could be hopeful. We'll see. As always, expect the worst and hope for the best. But we're not jumping off of the pedestrian bridge just yet. I want to see what it looks like. But the end is near for 17. It feels like, and probably Derrick Henry as well. I'm not ready for that, but it's time to rebuild. So we'll see. If you've made it this far, you can probably see the backdrop. We've got some new additions because, obviously it's not Adam taking up half the screen. But the Clipboard Jesus jersey. We lived through times like that to get to times like here with hope. And so once again, folks, we won't do any more Titans talk because you probably stopped listening by now. But this has been episode 56 of the Breaking Balls podcast. Again, your solo Bob episode. We'll be back next week. Kansas. Personally, I think Denny Hamlin's going to be your winner. Go ahead and pencil in Denny Hamlin, your Kansas winner, 23-11. Swept it last year. Their car owners due for a win. I think Denny Hamlin's going to win at Kansas next week. So we'll see if I can find a co-host next week. Might be another solo Bob episode. Who knows? But again, like, subscribe, tell a friend. And we'll see you next week on the Breaking Balls podcast.